This is a Fox News alert. ISIS getting dangerously close to U.S. troops at an air base in Iraq. Today, dozens of ISIS fighters dressed in Iraqi army uniforms attacking near the perimeter of al-Assad Air Base in Anbar province. Why should you be alarmed? Because we have more than 300 of our American troops at that base training Iraqi forces. Now, the Pentagon says Iraqi forces stopped today's ISIS attack, but make no mistake about it. This is new. This is dangerous. On the record is live team coverage of all the angles of this breaking news. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North and Congressman Peter King are here. But first, Defense One's Kevin Barron joins us. Nice to see you, Kevin.
How are you?
So what happened?
Well, this was a group, like you said, a little over 20 fighters who made their way to the perimeter. Some set off some suicide vests. The Iraqi forces engaged them, the Pentagon says, killed 8 of them, and it was over pretty quick.
All right, what did the Pentagon say? Were they concerned about this? Because this is, we have our people there. Yeah,
well, today they were pretty nonchalant in that, you know what, this is a huge base if you've been there before, and to be on one side of it versus the other is miles. I think they said it's the size of Boulder, Colorado, to give you an idea of it. And they thought it was a pretty desperate attempt to, you know, so if your frontline fighters are already loaded with suicide vests, what were they really trying to accomplish here?
What did they accomplish?
Not much at all. You know, there was over and done with, and I heard later today Apaches were scrambled but never had to be used. But if anything, they showed that they could get there and that they're at the perimeter. They're already in control of the nearby town, Baghdadi. But they've been in this is an Anbar. This has been a contested area for a long time.
All right, what were they trying to do? I mean, obviously they're trying to kill if they were in suicide vests. I mean, what was the point of going after that base?
Well, this is where, like you said, this is where there are this group of trainers, 300 Americans on the ground. So it's a chance to engage. It's a chance to draw the fight to the Americans, to the Iraqis. And to show that they could at least mount an attack, I would guess.
Well, I mean, it doesn't sound like they had much notice of it. That I mean, were the Americans ready for it?
Well, I guess it was ready as anything. But again, the Americans didn't engage with them. This was all they said. It was all Iraqis that did the fighting.
And we have 300 trainers there. What does that mean, a trainer?
Well, you know, the trainers. This is the Pentagon's way of saying they're not ground combat troops. They're advising the Iraqis. They're teaching them to, you know, how to get it together and bring the fight back to ISIS. Without actually being the trigger pullers. These are not frontline Marines.
Are these people who could defend themselves?
Sure. You know, as always, any soldiers, any American troop, as Lieutenant Colonel will tell you, is ready to defend themselves at any minute.
Kevin, thank you.
All right.
And today, Pentagon Press Secretary Rear Admiral John Kirby telling us more disturbing details about this ISIS attack on the Iraqi base.
We're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 total ISIL fighters. The attempted attack was led, we believe, by at least several, and I don't have a good number for you, but at least several suicide attackers. And early indications are that yes, some of them did detonate their vests, detonate themselves.
So here are the two questions we should all be asking. Is it likely our U.S. troops will get drawn into combat, and will they be ready? Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North joins us. Nice to see you, Ali. The Pentagon seems rather blasé about this. So does Kevin, rather blasé about it. To me, when you've got the enemy approaching the perimeter of a base, even if it's big, that would be something that would grab my attention.
Been there many times, Greta. That is an absolutely enormous base. For the Marines who have been out there training these Iraqis, this was a live-fire training evaluation for the Marines. It's the kind of thing that they've come away from very pleased because of the way they handled themselves. There is some disturbing news in it. The day before, ISIS took Baghdadi, the nearest town, which is about 20 kilometers away. Good news, al-Assad has its own power, it's got its own water, it's got its own sewage system. It is a self-contained city of its own. And unfortunately, the Iraqis were unable to react to what was taking place in Baghdadi. So, are they ready for prime time? No. But this is a case where, in previous events, not much different than this one, the entire Iraqi garrison has fled. They didn't do that today, which tells me, one, this is the success of the American training mission that we should never have abandoned back in 2011. And number two, the message ought to be very clear. Don't pull out of Afghanistan like we did out of Iraq. When you've got American trainers and advisors on the ground, as I say, this becomes a live-fire training exercise for those that you're training.
All right, but here's the thing that why, and look, you know, it's no secret I'm not been in the military, but here's the thing that a week ago, they weren't at the perimeter of the base.
A week ago, they hadn't taken Baghdadi.
Right, but I'm saying a week ago they weren't, and so you know, there may have been no sort of we didn't lose any military, but it certainly seems like it's a creep.
Look,
it's creeping closer, and it's getting more aggressive.
I will leave to Catherine the intelligence analysis of what the ISIS was really up to, but it would tell me that there's a bunch of juiced up ISIS troops who just seized a town, and somebody says to the local commander, let's go attack Assad, the big air base everybody knows about 20 kilometers away. And so this is a poorly planned operation. Clearly they got close enough, but that's not how, if you don't have RPAs, remotely piloted aircraft, or as the media calls them, drones, up overhead 24/7, this is going to continue to happen. Anbar province needs to get taken back before the Iraqi army tries a major operation like Mosul.
Which is why I think that this is, I'm not so blasé about it as the Pentagon is.
Well, I'm just saying
that if this is getting a little bit worse, not a whole lot worse, but a little bit worse, they're getting a little bit closer. That's not a direction where we're getting ahead of them. We're not like pushing them farther away. We're not getting more of them.
Look at this has been a rolling series of disasters for the Iraqi army ever since last summer.
But does that then become a rolling disaster for us because we've got our advisors there?
Look, without putting the advisors out there with the troops that are supposed to be doing the job, this will never succeed. And so, look, here's what would have made it better. Constant stare from an aerostat or from unmanned aerial vehicles. Number two, making sure you've got close air support, forward air controllers and joint tactical air controllers on the ground. We didn't have those out in Baghdadi. That's the bad news.
All right, you know, I wasn't saying we should take our advisors out. I was more concerned, are we adequately protecting those who we have there?
I can assure you, having talked to one of the Marines who was out there with me the last time, there's plenty of protection for those U.S. Marines. They carry it with them. This was for the U.S. Marines and the trainers on the ground. This was not a threat to them.
All right.
And before I close,
I know you have to say one thing before you go.
Betsy, happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah, he had to say that to his wife because he said that he's a little bit slow at buying a present.
I'm
but
unprepared.
Anyway, you're unprepared, yes. Colonel North, thank you.
Thank you.
And right now, ISIS is spreading to more countries outside of Syria and Iraq. Tonight, 21 Christians kidnapped by ISIS. Egypt's state-run news agency reported that Egypt is planning to evacuate its citizens from Libya as ISIS is on the move there. And Fox News chief intelligence correspondent Catherine Herridge joins us. What's going on in Libya?
Well, what happened in November and then also December is that nearly 24 Christians, they're Egyptians, but they're called Coptic Christians, were taken hostage by ISIS in Libya. These are people who are there kind of like migrant workers just to make a living. And now in the latest issue of their magazine online, they're showing these individuals in the orange jumpsuits that we've associated with all of these other Western hostages. There are even reports tonight some of them may be dead, which is being denied by the Egyptians. But the bottom line is that you are seeing ISIS in Libya with this propaganda, and then also the testimony we heard on Capitol Hill really getting a foothold in Libya. This is a place where we no longer have any kind of diplomatic presence.
All right, well, this is again more the creep sort of things get creeping. I realize that our base may not have been in danger, but it's creeping towards the base. ISIS started in Syria.
Correct.
Creeped to Iraq. Right. Now creeped to Libya. I mean, so it's a little bit on the move. Maybe maybe it hasn't come to our shores that way, but it's a creeping.
Well, you're onto something in the sense that I would only sort of politely disagree with the colonel about the Al-Assad air base in the sense that, to me, based on the intelligence, there seems to be three objectives here. One is to get themselves into the news in a big way because all of this propaganda really goes to the benefit of ISIS. Number two, they only have to get one suicide bomber through the perimeter of that base and kill a couple of dozen Americans to achieve a major goal. And number three, sort of the home run would be kidnapping a member of the American military. So I don't think the objective is necessarily taking over the base. They can achieve a lot of other goals sort of in the interim.
Right. Is there any evidence that ISIS is hooked up in any way or has any relationship with Boko Haram?
We recently had a briefing on this subject, and the view of the intelligence community is that Boko Haram is sort of draping itself in the mantle of ISIS. But these analysts would be the first to admit that we don't have the best intelligence on the ground. And what I would say, based on my reporting, is that it's another example of how this is really a battle of ideas versus just a kinetic battle.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
And today was not the first time Iraq's al-Assad air base has come under mortar fire, but today's ISIS attack was the most aggressive since U.S. troops arrived there last year. Also this week, an ominous ISIS taking control of an Iraqi town only a few miles from the air base. So are the U.S. troops training the Iraqis, or are they just sitting ducks? Congressman Peter King joins us. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Greta.
I don't know if you could listen to Colonel Oliver North, but he says our Marines are tough and they're ready and they could handle the base. But then Catherine points out that all we need to do is have one suicide bomber go in there and have even the least bit success, and all of a sudden it changes things. What's your thought on this tonight?
Yeah, Greta, I share many of your concerns. Now, this isn't Dien Bien Phu or Khe Sanh. The fact is, those 300 Marines are the toughest guys around, and they are well armed. But the fact that the ISIS attack today didn't work doesn't mean that it couldn't work in the future. It doesn't mean that something bad couldn't have been done. The fact is, when you have the enemy only 9 miles away, and that's almost like a pool table. I've spoken to troops who have been at that air base, and 9 miles is no distance at all. And so anytime the enemy is 9 miles away from you, that's a lot closer than it was a few days ago. And al-Baghdadi is not a major city, but it's a key city, and that it's so close to the airbase. So this, to me, shows the incremental growth by ISIS. And we mentioned Libya, we mentioned other parts of the region. But listen, those Marines can handle themselves. But I think that more should be done to take out ISIS, to go after them, whether it's air attacks or whatever. And I spoke again to someone today who had been over there, and maybe even sucker them into a ground fight. But I don't think, again, we're willing to do that. But let's not play this game forever, where we're hoping they're going to keep running ill-prepared attacks, and they're not going to get through. They only have to get through once. They only have to be successful once. And again, 9 miles is a pretty short distance.
Well, and I mean, the other thing too is that it's that creeping. I mean, they're getting closer to us. We're not.
Right.
The Iraqi forces are not pushing closer to them. The direction isn't the other way around. And it may not be. Maybe nothing happened today, but just if one of our military gets grabbed by ISIS, we've seen what happens to the Jordanian military. I mean, it's just sort of the idea that this is profoundly dangerous. And I hope that we have adequate support for our people, and that we're giving them everything they need.
Yeah, and I would hope that we go more on offense. I don't like the idea of just waiting there for them to come. Again, the Marines couldn't be tougher. Nobody has more guts than they do. Nobody's better trained than they are. But still, if you're just back on defense, things can go bad. We should be going out after them, routing them out of al-Baghdadi, going after them, putting them on defense. And whether it involves air attacks, whether it involves special forces or whatever, we shouldn't just be sitting there. Again, that's all they have to do is be lucky once, and it would be an absolute catastrophe if anyone was captured or killed on that base. And again, with that type of proximity, I wouldn't be so cavalier about it.
Congressman, thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Now to another very dangerous spot tonight, Yemen. The White House chief of counterterror admitting the overthrow of Yemen's government by Shiite rebels caught U.S. intelligence off guard. Nick Rasmussen making that horrifying admission to a Senate panel. Now, Republican Senator Roy Blunt also noting at the same hearing that President Obama recently touted Yemen as a successful counter-terror partner. Former UN Ambassador John Bolton joined us. Good evening, sir. I think it's rather disturbing if our intelligence branch is caught off guard for something so profoundly important as the fall of Yemen, which was our partner in fighting al-Qaeda at the Arabian Peninsula.
Well, I think it's worse than an intelligence failure. Certainly, in a narrow sense, it was, and it's been admitted by the administration. But it goes beyond that. Intelligence is only a piece of overall statecraft and foreign policy. You don't have to be an intelligence analyst to have an opinion about what's happening in Yemen. And it's been clear for a year that the country has been disintegrating. So you can sit and wait for a tactical disposition of where the al-Houthi fighters are on any given day. That isn't really going to tell you the big intelligence picture, which is the country's collapsing.
Well, if it was so obvious, and as you look back now, I mean, it seems quite obvious, that makes it even worse if the intelligence says that they didn't see it coming if it's so obvious.
Well,
that makes it even more disturbing.
It is, because it's not simply an intelligence failure. Facts don't tell you what your policy ought to be, and facts don't tell you what the future is. That's the job of statesmen, to look out, not intelligence analysts, and the statesmen here were looking the wrong way.
Well, actually, I mean, it almost looks like neglect.
It
I
is.
mean,
That's
if you,
exactly the.
It's
that's
neglect.
Exactly
if you
right.
see a country disintegrating, if all the signs are there and you just sit there until, like, you know, until it happens.
Well, it's happened in other countries too. How many times do we have to go through this? It's happened obviously in Syria and Iraq. It's happened in Libya. Now it's happened in Yemen. It happened earlier in Somalia. It's not like this is suddenly something that we've never seen before. So I think that makes it more inexcusable, and it goes to the point that that if the White House, if the State Department, if the Pentagon, if all of the agencies of the U.S. national security apparatus are blind to what's happening, you have to ask yourself why. They're not suppressing information from the intelligence community. They're suppressing reality because their policy leaders are saying Yemen's a success.
All right, we only have 30 seconds left. What do you make of ISIS in Libya?
Well, I think ISIS is spreading throughout the region. I think in the competition with al-Qaeda, it's winning, whether it's in taking hostages in Libya or getting with Boko Haram in Nigeria, other things. It's getting worse. Nobody should blink that reality.
But, you know, do you think ISIS is hooked up with Boko Haram?
I think they talk to each other. I think they're rivals in an ideological sense. In a territorial sense, they're far apart from each other. But I'd be surprised if they weren't talking.
Ambassador, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And straight ahead, this time it's a Democratic governor, a dramatic fall from grace. Oregon's four-term Democratic governor resigns amid an exploding ethics scandal. Last time it was Republican Governor McDonnell of Virginia. He's been sentenced to prison. So will Oregon's Democratic governor get the same treatment as Virginia's Republican governor? Our political panel here to talk about that next. Plus, a lawyer from a big law firm in D.C., Washington, D.C., murdered right after texting his wife. There is surveillance video. Plus, we have our own video that no one else has. On the Record Investigates coming up.